Welcome back to KrossUSA channel. From ancient forests to precision-cut lumber, witness how 3 legendary mills transform raw timber into America's building blocks. This is the craft that built a nation. You know, there's something deeply American about the journey of timber from forest to finished lumber. It's a story that's been written in the sawdust and sweat of generations, and nowhere is that story told better than at Weyerhaeuser's massive operation in Magnolia, Mississippi. Founded back in 1900 by Frederick Weyerhaeuser, a German immigrant who understood that America's forests were its fortune, this company has been shaping the landscape of American timber for over a century. The Magnolia facility represents the pinnacle of what happens when you combine that old-world respect for timber with cutting-edge modern technology. It's a beautiful marriage, really. Let's start where every board begins, deep in the Mississippi forests. These aren't just random trees being harvested. Weyerhaeuser practices what they call sustainable forestry, which means for every tree they harvest, they're planting seedlings to ensure forests for generations to come. The primary species they're working with here are southern yellow pine and various hardwoods native to Mississippi: oak, hickory, and sweet gum. Southern yellow pine, in particular, has been the backbone of American construction since colonial times. It's strong, it's versatile, and it grows relatively fast in the southern climate. NNTHE harvesting operation itself is a marvel of modern forestry. Today's loggers use specialized feller bunchers, machines that can grab a tree, cut it at the base, and lay it down in one smooth operation. These machines are operated by highly skilled professionals who can selectively harvest trees while minimizing impact on the surrounding forest. Once the trees are felled, a processor delambs them and cuts them to optimal lengths. It's an art form informed by technology, with computer assistants helping operators make the most of every single tree. Then comes the transport. These massive log trucks, and we're talking about rigs that can carry 40 tons or more of timber, make their way along forest roads to the mill. When those trucks roll into the Weyerhaeuser Magnolia facility, they're entering one of the most sophisticated lumber processing operations in the world. The first stop is the log yard, and this is where things get really interesting. The yard isn't just a storage area. It's a carefully orchestrated sorting and inventory system that would make any logistics manager proud. But logs are unloaded using heavy-duty loaders equipped with massive grapples. Here's where the technology really shines. As logs are unloaded and sorted, they're scanned and cataloged. Modern mills use laser scanning technology to measure diameter, length, and even detect certain defects. This data feeds into a computer system that tracks every single log through the entire milling process. The sorting process separates logs by species, size, and quality. Different logs have different destinies in the mill. A massive, straight southern yellow pine log with tight grain might be destined to become structural lumber for home building. A hardwood log with beautiful figure might be headed for appearance-grade products. Logs with defects aren't wasted. They'll be processed differently, perhaps becoming industrial lumber or wood chips for paper production. Nothing goes to waste in a modern mill. Even the bark ends up as mulch or fuel for the mill's boilers. The debarking process is the first step of actual processing. Logs enter a debarking drum, a massive rotating cylinder that tumbles the logs, while high-pressure water jets and mechanical scrapers strip away the bark. Now we get to the heart of the operation, the sawmill itself. The primary breakdown begins at the head rig, and folks, this is where a century of engineering evolution becomes evident. Modern head rigs are computer-controlled marvels that can process a log in seconds, but the fundamental principle would be recognizable to a sawyer from 1920. The log is secured on a carriage, though today's carriages are hydraulic and computer-positioned, not the old steam and cable systems. Sensors scan the log, and optimization software determines the best way to cut it to maximize yield and value. The head saw, typically a massive bandsaw with a blade that's 10 to 12 feet in diameter, makes the initial cuts. As the head rig processes the log, it produces cants, large timber pieces that will be further processed, and slabs, which are the rounded outer portions. Those slabs don't go to waste. They'll either be chipped for paper pulp or run through a chipper canter to extract any usable lumber before the remainder is chipped. NNTHE cants move on to the gang saws or twin bandsaws for secondary breakdown. Gang saws are particularly impressive. Imagine multiple saw blades arranged in a frame, all cutting simultaneously to rip a cant into multiple boards in one pass. It's industrial-scale processing that's both efficient and precise. The alternative, twin bandsaws, can be adjusted on the fly to cut different sizes, offering flexibility in production. Next comes the edger, which squares up the rough boards coming from the gang saw. These boards still have irregular edges, called wane, that need to be removed. The edger uses multiple saw blades positioned according to the board's dimensions to create straight, parallel edges. Again, sensors scan each board, and computers position the saws for optimal yield. The offcuts from this process, called edgings, are too small for lumber but perfect for chipping. NNTHE trimmer is the final sizing station. The trimmer uses multiple saws positioned at fixed intervals. As boards move through on a high-speed chain conveyor, sensors detect defects and determine the best cutting pattern to maximize the number of quality boards while minimizing waste. Sections with knots or other defects are cut out, and the good sections become finished-length boards. Throughout all this cutting, there's a constant roar of machinery and the sweet smell of fresh-cut pine. The rough green lumber, called green because it still contains moisture from the living tree, needs to be dried. This is crucial. Wood shrinks as it dries, and if you build with green lumber, you'll have gaps and warping as it seasons. Weyerhaeuser's Magnolia facility uses both air drying and kiln drying, depending on the product and customer specifications. NNTHE kilns are enormous chambers, large enough to hold thousands of board feet of lumber. Lumber is stacked with spacers called stickers between each layer to allow air circulation. Inside the kiln, temperature and humidity are carefully controlled through a drying schedule that might last several days. Too fast, and the lumber checks and splits. Too slow, and you're wasting time and energy. The schedules are developed through decades of experience and scientific testing. Modern kilns use computer controls that monitor moisture content in real time and adjust conditions accordingly. After drying, the lumber goes through planing and grading. The planer takes rough sawn boards and surfaces them to smooth, uniform thickness. The machine has multiple cutting heads, with dozens of small knives that remove a thin layer from all sides of the board. What goes in rough comes out smooth and ready for use. Grading is where human expertise still reigns supreme. While computers can detect some defects, trained lumber graders evaluate each board according to established standards. They're looking at knot size and placement, grain patterns, warping, checking, and dozens of other factors. The final step is packaging and shipping. Lumber is sorted by size and grade, bundled with steel bands and labeled for shipment. Some goes out on trucks to local customers, some on rail cars to distant markets. What makes the Weyerhaeuser Magnolia operation special isn't just the technology. It's the combination of modern efficiency with traditional timber wisdom. The people running these machines are craftspeople who understand wood, who can read grain, and know instinctively how a log will cut. They're carrying on a tradition that goes back to the first sawmill in America, established in 1633 in what's now Maine, but they're doing it with tools their predecessors could barely imagine. Now let's cross the Atlantic and visit Kellerholz, a German sawmill operation that brings that legendary German engineering precision to the art of lumber processing. Kellerholz specializes in processing European softwoods, primarily spruce and pine from sustainably managed German forests. These forests have been managed for timber production for centuries, literally since medieval times, and the Germans have perfected the science of forestry to a degree that's almost obsessive. Kellerholz use ring debarkers, which are particularly effective for the smaller diameter logs common in European forestry. As the log passes through, rotating arms with carbide cutters strip the bark in a continuous spiral pattern. It's remarkably fast and waste efficient. Their primary breakdown uses a combination approach. For larger logs, they employ a modern band mill head rig. But here's where the German engineering mindset shows. They've optimized the entire log flow with sophisticated scanning and positioning systems that would make an automation engineer weep with joy. Each log is laser scanned to create a three-dimensional profile, and optimization software calculates the cutting pattern that will yield the maximum value before the saw ever touches wood. NNTHE secondary breakdown employs multi-blade gang ripsaws that process these cants into multiple boards in a single pass. German-made gang saws are renowned for their precision. Blade alignment is maintained to tolerances that would satisfy a watchmaker. This precision means more accurate boards with less waste and less need for correction in downstream processing. Kellerholz's grading and sorting system is extensively automated, using optical scanners that can detect knots, grain deviations, and other defects at line speed. Human graders oversee the system and handle edge cases, but the bulk of sorting happens automatically. Boards are diverted to different lines based on grade, with premium appearance grade material separated from structural lumber. The sophistication of these systems reflects decades of German engineering refinement. Their drying facilities include both conventional kilns and newer vacuum kilns, which can dry lumber faster and at lower temperatures. Vacuum kiln drying is particularly useful for preventing checking and maintaining color in premium grades. The process is more expensive, but produces superior results for high-value products. For those of us who remember when made in Germany meant the absolute best, Kellerholz lives up to that tradition. Finally, let's visit something truly special. Charles Ransford Son in Bishop's Castle, Shropshire, England. This is where traditional British sawmilling meets modern efficiency, and it's a reminder that sometimes the old ways, updated with thoughtful modernization, produce the finest results. And Bishop's Castle is in the heart of the Welsh Marches, a region that's been producing timber since before the Romans arrived. The Ransford family has been running their sawmill for generations, and they represent something increasingly rare. A family-owned sawmill that successfully navigated the transition from traditional methods to modern processing, while maintaining their commitment to quality and personal service. NTHE Mill primarily processes hardwoods, native to Britain, oak, ash, beech, and sycamore, along with softwoods like larch and Douglas fir from local estates and forestry operations. British hardwoods, particularly oak, have legendary status. English oak built the ships that defeated the Spanish Armada, framed medieval cathedrals that still stand today, and furnished homes across the British Empire. The wood from these trees, grown slowly in Britain's temperate climate, has a density and durability that's prized worldwide. When logs arrive at Ransford's yard, there's an initial assessment that draws on generations of timber knowledge. The Ransfords and their experienced sawyers can look at a log and know its history, whether it grew in a valley or on a hillside, whether it's been stressed by storms, where the best timber will be found in its cross-section. This intuitive understanding of wood, accumulated over lifetimes spent working with timber, is something no computer can replicate, though modern tools certainly complement it. NTHE Mill uses a combination of traditional and modern equipment that creates an interesting workflow. Their main breakdown saw is a substantial band mill, not the biggest in the world, but built with British attention to mechanical precision. The saw carriage is a beautiful piece of machinery, incorporating both hydraulic positioning systems and manual controls that allow the sawyer to make judgment calls based on what they're seeing as the log is opened up. Because here's the thing about sawing quality hardwood. Every log is different, and sometimes the man at the controls needs to deviate from the computer's plan to work around a defect or capture a particularly beautiful section of grain. NTHE Ransfords employ experienced sawyers who've learned their craft over decades. These aren't button pushers. They're craftsmen who understand wood at a fundamental level. When they're breaking down a prime English oak log, they're thinking about the end uses. That clear section might become flooring for a period home restoration. This figured piece could be perfect for furniture making. The sawyer is constantly making decisions about cut thickness, orientation, and sequencing to maximize not just volume but value and beauty. The debarking at Ransford's is done selectively. Some logs, particularly valuable hardwoods, destined for high-end uses, are debarked manually or left with bark on to be removed during the sawing process. This might seem old-fashioned, but there's method to it. Bark can actually help protect the underlying wood during storage, and for certain specialty markets, like timber framing or rustic furniture, the customer might want to see the log with bark on to assess quality before purchase. And after primary breakdown, the mill employs a combination of resawing techniques. They have modern bandsaw resaws for production work, but they also maintain traditional circular saws for certain operations. The circular saws, with their massive blades, some 4 feet in diameter or more, have been a fixture of British mills for over a century. They're incredibly powerful, capable of ripping through oak like it was pine, and for certain types of cuts, they're still the most efficient tool available. One of the fascinating aspects of Ransford's operation is their approach to drying and seasoning. While they do use modern kilns for customers who need dried lumber quickly, they also maintain extensive air drying facilities. Air drying is the traditional method of seasoning timber, and for certain hardwoods and certain uses, it's still considered superior. The timber is stacked outdoors or in open sheds with stickers between each board to allow air circulation. Depending on thickness and species, air drying might take a year or several years. Oak, for instance, traditionally requires 1 year per inch of thickness. NWHY go through this extended process? Because air-dried hardwood has qualities that kiln-dried lumber sometimes lacks. The slow, natural drying process is gentler on the wood, reducing stress and checking. The color development is often superior. And there's something about the stability of properly air-dried oak that's hard to quantify but immediately apparent to experienced woodworkers. It's the difference between a board that's technically dry and a board that's truly seasoned. NTHE Mill's kiln facilities, when used, are operated with the same attention to detail. Hardwoods are finicky about drying. Rush them and they'll split, check, and warp. Each species has its own drying schedule, and even within a species, the schedule might vary based on thickness, initial moisture content, and intended use. The Ransfords use schedules developed over years of experience, modified as needed for specific batches of timber. End grading and sorting at Ransfords is where human expertise is absolutely essential. British hardwood grading standards consider factors that automated systems struggle with, things like the character of grain patterns, the quality of figure in woods like ash or oak, the presence of medullary rays in quarter-sawn oak, and dozens of other subtle characteristics that affect appearance and value. An experienced grader can look at a board and immediately classify it for its best use, whether that's structural timber, appearance-grade millwork, furniture quality stock, or one of many specialized categories. The mill also does custom cutting, which is increasingly rare in the modern lumber industry. A furniture maker might bring in a specification for a particular dimension or a special grain orientation. A timber framer restoring a medieval barn might need oak beams cut to specific, non-standard sizes. Ransfords can accommodate these special requests because they've maintained the flexibility and expertise that mass production mills have necessarily abandoned. It's a service that's valuable beyond the immediate financial return because it maintains relationships with craftspeople and keeps traditional woodworking skills alive in the community. One particularly interesting aspect of the Ransford operation is their work with locally sourced timber. In an era when lumber is a global commodity, there's growing interest in local wood for local use. It reduces transportation costs and environmental impact, supports local forestry, and maintains the traditional connection between a region's forests and its buildings and furniture. The Ransfords work with local estate managers and small woodland owners to process timber from trees that might be too small or too few for larger industrial mills. This keeps small-scale forestry economically viable and maintains the diversity of the rural landscape. NTHE Mill also processes storm-damaged timber, which requires special expertise. When a severe storm comes through, as happens periodically in Britain, mature trees are blown down. These logs need to be processed relatively quickly before they deteriorate, but storm-felled timber can have internal stresses and hidden damage that make sawing challenging. The Ransfords' experience allows them to salvage valuable lumber from these logs that might otherwise be wasted. Throughout the Ransford operation, there's a sense of connection to tradition that's increasingly rare in modern industry. The building itself has been a sawmill for over 100 years. Some of the equipment, carefully maintained and updated, has been in use for decades. The Sawyers learned from previous generations and are teaching the next. It's a living link to a time when craftsmanship and personal knowledge were the foundation of manufacturing. NBUT. This isn't romanticized nostalgia. It's a working business that's economically viable, precisely because it combines traditional knowledge with appropriate modern technology. The Ransfords haven't rejected progress. They've adopted it thoughtfully, keeping what works and updating what needed improvement. They use laser measurers and moisture meters, alongside their experienced eye. They maintain a website and manage inventory with modern software, while still offering personal service and custom work. What operations like Charles Ransford Son represent is something valuable that we risk losing in the rush to efficiency and scale. They remind us that lumber isn't just a commodity, it's a material with character and history, coming from trees that grew for decades or centuries, processed by people who understand and respect wood. When you buy a board from Ransford's, you're not just getting a piece of timber cut to specification. You're getting a product of accumulated knowledge, careful selection, and skilled processing that honors both the tree and the end use. NFOR. Those of us who remember when every town had a local sawmill, when you could talk to the sawyer about what you needed, and they'd help you select the right piece for your project, operations like this are a reminder of what's possible when craftsmanship survives, alongside progress. The smell of fresh-cut oak, the scream of a bandsaw biting into hardwood, the satisfaction of seeing a beautiful board emerge from a rough log. These experiences connect us to generations of craftspeople who've worked with wood, and operations like Charles Ransford Son keep that connection alive.